the Defiant Ones, and this is a special night for me because I get to chat with someone who's a friend of mine. We share a lot of common interests in music, in wrestling. It is the wrestling genius. Welcome back to Defy, Daniel Makabe.
Thank you for having me. I definitely never expected to be doing one of these with you. We basically just hanging out is just doing one of these, basically.
Last time I saw you was at Bumbershoot. We got to watch Descendants, Sunny Day Real Estate. You wrestled a little bit underneath the Space Needle. Wait, no, you didn't. You didn't. We
hung out and watched wrestling together in the rain. Yeah,
but we watched Descendants and Sunny Day and some AFI and stuff. Yeah. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Definitely expected. I mean, it's the end of the year and kind of just enjoying the holidays, and wasn't expecting to be wrestling tonight. I just was enjoying time off and kind of looking forward to 2024, and got a last minute call. Hey, can you come to Seattle? Can you wrestle one of your favorite opponents on earth in Artemis Spencer here at Washington Hall? It's like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. So, yeah, it's cool. It's been almost 4 years since I was here. Yeah, crazy.
You've wrestled Artie before.
I've wrestled. It's funny because Artie and I have known each other for probably 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we both started pretty young for two different promotions in Vancouver. He started with ECCW when he was like 16.
Wow.
And I started for a company called All Star Wrestling in Vancouver when I was 19. And we were kind of ships passing in the night for years and years and years. But we always enjoyed each other's company, and we both have a lot of similar tastes when it comes to technical wrestling and Japanese like shoot style of the 90s. And Artie's just like a master grappler that a lot of people don't know that. And so, but it wasn't until 5-6 years ago we had our first match, and then years kind of went by. We wrestled again in 2021, and then earlier this year we wrestled down in Portland in July of this year, and we actually have a match scheduled for Vancouver 4 weeks from tonight.
That's cool, man.
For NEW. So this will be our fourth match ever against one another. Take the show on the road,
dude.
And I could honestly wrestle him every night, and we could have a different match every night and have just interesting matches that like. I feel like I kind of bully him because he's so good at what he does, but there's another side of him that's so incredibly talented and unique as far as the landscape of independent wrestling goes when it comes to his submissions and his like technical grappling. And I feel like he doesn't do enough of it.
Sure.
And I obviously that's kind of my bread and butter.
You bring it out of him.
I lean hard on it, and so whenever I get a chance to wrestle him, I'm like, hey, you should do this. He's like, oh.
Well, I haven't thought of that.
I've never thought about that. Like, oh, you could do this as well. Oh.
You know you can do that, Artie.
Oh, and honestly, you know what happens because we do catch wrestling in Vancouver. So the Lionsgate, which half of the card is here, people are either trained at or go to the Lionsgate.
Everyone always sings the praises of that place.
Yeah, and so I'm there too. I wasn't trained there, obviously, but I'm still part of the team, and we train catch wrestling there. And kind of the way the sequence of events is, I learn something cool in catch wrestling class from Artie, and then I repurpose it into the context of pro wrestling, and then I bully Artie into doing it.
That's cool.
And repeat, recycle. So yeah.
Something I learned just a few minutes about you is that, so you're wearing glasses now. You don't wear glasses when you wrestle.
Yes.
Obviously, I mean, you have the recreation specs like Horace Grant. I can't imagine that wrestling.
Good reference.
But you don't wear contacts ever. You said that you're basically blind when you wrestle.
I don't know if I'm technically legally blind, but I certainly am not allowed to drive a car. I can't see a computer screen. I can barely see. I couldn't see our camera operator. If I took these off, really, it'd just be a blur off in the corner. So, I've. You know what? It's funny because a lot of my opponents, until I wise them up to it, they don't even realize it until I sort of say, "Oh yeah, by the way, like, don't give me any visual cues out there, like, hey, you need to go over here," because I'm not going to pick up on it.
Has that ever presented a problem over your years?
No, it hasn't. Thankfully, I've got a really good memory.
Good.
That's So that's part of the secret to wrestling genius is I've got a really good memory, and like, have I occasionally hit someone maybe a little too hard in a place that I shouldn't have hit them? Yeah, probably. But but my placements and my footwork and everything, it's just years of repetition, right? And so if it's like a different size ring, like I think it's an 18-foot ring down there, but which is standard on the indies. There's some like 20s are not that common on the indies. There's one group on Vancouver Island that has a 14-foot ring.
Wow.
So you kind of have to get a little accustomed to like, okay, what's my footing like? How many steps? Whatever. But honestly, like I've used it to kind of almost determine my style of wrestling. Like I love technical wrestling. I love close quarters wrestling. And so I don't really need to be able to see the person if I can feel them, right? Or if I can, So, yeah, it has caught many of people off guard when I say, "Oh, yeah, I'm blind." What do you mean you're blind? I've seen you do topes. What do you mean you're blind?
Yeah, I just fly.
I just fly out, and I hope there's going to be someone there when I land. Yeah.
So we're going to touch on a couple things here, music and wrestling.
Sure.
So my question for you is, where do we start? What came first? Your obsession with music or your obsession with wrestling?
Wrestling
Okay.
came first. Music, I grew up in like a somewhat musical household, but like neither of my parents could play an instrument. But like my mom grew up and wanted to be a hippie. She was just a little too young.
Yeah.
But there was always, Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel. One of my favorite records growing up that we'd listen to in the car was Paul Simon's Graceland.
Yeah.
Right. So always had kind of an ear for music when I was young and singing along. And I used to have a decent singing voice. But wrestling started from a very young age. I was actually just recalling this story with my mom over Christmas because my fiance was asking. But
what got this kid hooked? Why is my
soon to be
husband such a freak about wrestling?
I was 6 years old, and my dad took me to watch a closed circuit telecast of WrestleMania 7.
Wow.
So
this is up in Vancouver.
This was in Vancouver. This was before there was pay-per-view in Canada.
Okay.
So closed circuit, you always hear about like, WrestleMania 1 was on closed circuit, and a lot of the old Starcades were on closed circuit, and big boxing matches in the 70s and 80s were on closed circuit.
And this is Hogan and Slaughter.
This is Hogan Slaughter.
Yeah.
This is Hogan Slaughter. So this is, which, Canada had a real vested interest in that feud. But yeah, so I went to the Pacific Coliseum, which is still there. It's a dumpy old building in Vancouver. At the time, it's where the Vancouver Canucks played.
Okay.
Now it doesn't have a permanent tenant, but I've seen actually my first ever rock concert was in that same building as well, which, but yeah, so closed circuit, they just have the big screen set up on the middle of the floor. You just sit in the stands like you're at a sporting event, and they're playing the audio over the PA.
Yeah.
And WrestleMania 7 just hooked me, and ever since then it was like Saturday morning wrestling magazines, wrestling toys.
Who was your guy? Who was like the first guy? Mine was Ultimate Warrior.
I know it's hilarious. The world-renowned, I feel like I can say that, technical wrestler from the Northwest who's plied his craft all over the world and wrestled some of the best technical wrestlers on this planet. My guy was also the Ultimate Warrior.
Okay. Hey, yeah, man. Yes, dude. Okay, so so you got hooked, and you were they had their hooks in you wrestling.
Absolutely.
Did you wrestle with your friends? Were you that guy who
Not when I was that young. I had like the wrestling buddies, like the little pillow guys. I had Hogan, I had Warrior, I had DiBiase, and I
still have the Warrior.
Randy Savage.
Yeah.
I think all four of them are still in my mom's crawl space somewhere. Yeah.
The Tonka. And Tonka made those things?
Yeah, Tonka made those things, yeah. So I wrestled with those when I was young. It's not a secret that I was a backyard wrestler.
Yes, I want to talk about that.
Yeah, so that came kind of informally a little later on when I was just getting into high school.
Yeah.
And as I was just getting into high school, that was like Attitude Era, where
don't try this at home. You tried this
right?
at home.
Well, and so all of my friends who were like Fairweather fans, all of a sudden were like hardcore fans. Oh yeah, right. Everyone became a wrestling.
I was the
fan.
nerd who liked wrestling, and now all of a sudden everyone was joining in,
which was cool and kind of annoying at times too, because I used to be like, oh yeah, the Attitude Era is cool, but like
name 3 ECW wrestlers.
Well, like, and ECW didn't air in Canada, but like I was following ECW, getting home videos, and I started tape trading when I was like 14 or 15. So like I was getting into Japanese stuff, and like I was going to local independent shows. So, and I was trying to get the hooks of my fandom into my friends. And once the Attitude Era kind of dwindled off, they were like, "Oh no, we're good. We're onto something else.
We're gonna go
So,
date people and like get jobs, and you're like, no, wrestling,
wrestling exactly." And then it was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go get trained and
Yeah.
whatever." But then that kind of begat. I met some of my other friends going to local indie shows, and we started backyarding together in our late teenage years. The same group of friends, we were the ones who went and got trained together. When the local independent scene in the early 2000s really didn't speak to us, we just kept doing backyard wrestling because it was more fun, and we could put on our own shows and wrestle how we wanted to wrestle, when we wanted to wrestle. It was a lot more fulfilling. It was very, I say this to people, like, I have had way more backyard matches than pro matches, and that always like blows people's minds. And in hindsight, like, I kind of wish it was the other way around. It would have been nice to have gotten paid for all of that. But the fact of the matter is, like, I know that the landscape of independent wrestling, especially in the early 2000s, was very different from what it is now. It was definitely a lot more toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably, if I'd like really tried to stick to it and be like, I'm going to be an independent wrestler, I bet you I burn out in 2 years and I'm not here today. And I don't get to do all the cool things that I've been doing the last, I really started working indies again 9 years ago,
Of course.
9-10 years ago. But really, really going for it, let's say the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So none of that would happen if I had tried to stick it out 20 years ago.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Some names that you've wrestled backyard. Ricky Shane Page, is that true?
Yep.
Who else? Anyone else that we would know that you wrestled in the backyard days?
Oh, that you would know. Like, I was on shows with a lot of people who ended up, and I made a lot of friends. Like, I was friends with Alex Zane.
Yeah,
through
that's another guy.
backyarding.
Yeah,
Tony Deppen through backyarding. Who else did I meet? I mean, Drew Cordero, who runs Beyond Wrestling. Like, I knew, one of the biggest independents in the country.
Was there like a network of backyards?
So we had pre-Facebook, pre-social media, we had a forum, like a message board. Right? It was the Backyard Wrestling link.
I love this.
And literally everyone from all countries, all over the North America certainly, but also the UK, Australia. I was on shows with. We traveled to England for backyard shows. I was on shows with a 16-year-old Will Ospreay.
What?
Absolutely. I know Will. I know a bunch of those guys who ended up doing some big things over in England. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I was not a backyard. I wasn't to that level, but I was into something.
I've seen some of your backyarding.
I was in the backyard a little bit, but my real love was something called E-Feds. Are you familiar with what an E-Fed is?
I did E-Feds.
Basically, Dungeons and Dragons with wrestling, right?
I did E-Feds.
Role-playing games.
Absolutely, yeah.
So.
Very off and on. I did E-Feds. I first started doing E-Feds when I was like 14, 15. I remember that's how
I could type out a great match.
I remember that's how my friends and I learned what the term heel and face.
Oh.
Because the group that we were doing it with, they were like, "Oh, is your wrestler a heel or a face?" And one's like, "Oh, what's the difference?" Like, is a face very like defiant and like headstrong, and a heel kind of cowardly? And it's like, I mean, I guess, but it also just means good guy and bad guy.
Yeah,
right? So I did E-Feds. Yeah, not a crazy amount, but yeah, off and on. Yeah, I did for sure.
Nice. Okay, so let's hit on music a little bit.
Sure.
So that's where wrestling starts. When did you start getting into like music? Were you like get into a rock radio, or was it like a friend that got it?
It was. I'm an only child. I didn't have any older siblings.
Yeah.
Like, I had like older babysitters, but like they didn't really listen to anything that was like particularly noteworthy. It was just like
much music.
Yeah. So a lot of it comes from Much Music, like local rock radio, yes, but also Much Music, which for those not aware, that was the Canadian equivalent of MTV.
Mm-hmm.
But it played like some really interesting stuff that MTV would not play.
Like Gob?
Gob. So we have a law in Canada, the CanCon laws, right? So like 35% of all media on Canadian television and radio has to be Canadian produced.
Okay.
Right? So that includes like music videos. 35% of the videos had to be Canadian.
Yeah.
So I learned this from a friend a couple of years ago, but if, they got to fill an hour full of music videos and it's like, oh, we got like a 90-second spot, like what can we even fit in there? Well, not only can you fit a Gob song in there because it's 90 seconds, Gob from Langley, British Columbia, but also it fulfills the Canadian content.
There you go.
So you get a lot of Canadian punk bands on the television getting exposure they wouldn't normally see otherwise. DBS, I don't know if you know DBS, 90s North Vancouver.
No, I know Death by Stereo. I don't know DBS.
No, DBS, that's like 90s kind of like pop punk from North Vancouver, British Columbia. They were like 15-year-olds who like got big. There's a I'm trying to remember what the record's called. The single is called Snowball. But yeah, DBS got pretty big. I'm trying to think of other bands that use like how did they get a video on TV? But yeah, 90s Canadian punk and pop punk and that sort of stuff. Like definitely schooled on that. And then we had a chain of record stores in Western Canada called A&B Sound.
Okay.
And it was like primarily it was like a hi-fi, like television, stereos, like that kind of store. But they also had a killer music section, CDs first in the 90s, and then even as I was getting more into vinyl in my like early 20s, pretty decent section of that. And I didn't find this out at the time, but I guess as like a means to kind of undercut the other like national chains of music shops, like we had HMV, which is a British chain, but we had them in Canada as well. A&B Sound would like undercut and sell things like at cost or below cost to get people in the door to buy CDs, but also like, hey, buy this stereo or this television.
Kind of Best Buy used to do that too. It was like their lost leader.
But they had just the most ridiculous, like my local A&B Sound in Surrey, British Columbia, like there was a guy who worked there who was a couple years older than me that I went to school. Actually, I went to the same high school, and he was really into like interesting like metal and punk and stuff, so he like curated that section like and like I would just ask him like, hey, is this good, whatever, and I still have like 600 CDs somewhere in my apartment and like I just can't get rid of them. But like a lot of those were cultivated in my late teen years and into my early 20s before I became a vinyl guy, also through punk, obviously, right? Punk rock kept vinyl alive, honestly. All these years. But yeah, so A&B Sound was a big thing. Much Music's a big thing. And then as I got older, then it was like, you know, college radio and the internet and those sorts of things. Yeah.
If we could create a band of all wrestlers doing, you know, a hardcore or punk band, it would be you, Brody King. Who else? We would have...
I don't know if you know.
Alex Shelley?
Alex Shelley plays guitar. He sings. My guy, Kevin Koo, I got to shout him out. I know you're a fan of Kevin Koo. He plays bass.
Okay.
So,
nice. You just need a drummer.
Drummers are hard to find. That's why you see like the same drummers play in like 7 bands. Cause,
we can get a non-wrestler. Just like you can get a non-straight edge guy to play in a straight edge band.
Yeah.
You can get a non-wrestler.
A non-wrestler just because that's the other thing.
Put him on a lucha mask.
If you have a bad drummer, guess what? Your band is bad. Your band is bad. That is just the fact of the matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a story that we've talked about in the past that I would love for you to recall on this podcast. Now, it's definitely fast-forwarding a lot through your music career, but you went to Cuba.
Yes.
Tell us about your excursion, your experience with your band,
Yep.
and shout out your band, to Cuba.
Yeah, so I play in a couple bands, but that band specifically is called Taxa, Taxa. There is music available on Bandcamp and Spotify and all those spots where you can listen to music. Kind of a post-hardcore band, been around in Vancouver for close to 10 years now. I'm not the original guitar player, but I have been for like 6 or 7 years. And all the way back in 2017, we worked together with a nonprofit group called Solidarity Rocks, who are based in Sancti Spiritus, which is a town in Cuba, which is it's over 500 years old. And basically, they work to get visas to bring Canadian bands to Cuba and bring Cuban bands to Canada as kind of like a trade-off and like a exchange of culture. And so, but the other thing that they do, and we, work really hard, and we worked really hard to do this, was it's so hard for them to get instruments and equipment and funding or anything in Cuba because there's, limited resources and the trade embargo and all that stuff. And it honestly was a little bit easier for them to get stuff under Obama and then became hard again under Trump. And I don't think Biden really cares. So in 2017, we crowdsourced and got donations and we traveled to Cuba. We were there for 2 weeks. We brought an entire backline with us. Drum kit, I think we brought 4 or 5 amps, 9 guitars, I think, a couple basses, but then also hardware, drum sticks, guitar picks, guitar strings, because if I break a guitar string, I can go down the street, buy a new one. Yeah. No problem. Someone in Cuba breaks a guitar string, they don't have that same luxury, right?
Quite a while, yeah.
You should have seen some, especially the drum hardware there, the stuff that they were having to make do with, and everyone, it's kind of a communal thing, like all the local bands all share gear, because, like just the cymbals were just gnarly. They were like vicious weapons. They were so bad. We brought a Marshall half stack to Cuba. They asked us, they're like, hey, can you bring a Marshall? And we're like, we can try.
Yeah.
We brought a Marshall half stack to Cuba. All in all, we brought probably close to $5,000 worth of gear to Cuba. We told the airlines that it was kind of like a missionary trip. They gave us our luggage for free. They didn't charge us anything for it. We vehemently lied to the Cuban government about what all this was worth, and they had no clue because it's all so foreign to them. We played 2 weeks worth of shows all around the island. I think 8 shows in total all over Cuba with local Cuban bands, hardcore bands, metal bands. It's all kind of one big scene there.
Music there. Underground music.
Underground music, heavy music, and these just some of the most amazing, like, oh, this venue's 200 years old.
Wow.
Like, oh, okay, cool, you know? Taxa, my band, played. There was 2 other bands from Vancouver that played, and then we did kind of at the end of the night, kind of a super group of all the different people who played, and we just did a set of classic hardcore and punk covers to close the night out. So, you know, the stuff that everyone knows, like the Misfits and the Ramones, but also a band that Cubans love because one of their members, Roger Miret, is Cuban.
Agnostic Front.
Agnostic Front.
That's awesome.
We closed every night with the Cro-Mags.
Yeah.
Just one of the... I actually sang, which
That's
is
so
wild.
cool,
I wish there was video of it. I think there is somewhere.
Wow.
And then when all was said and done, we left all the instruments there.
Gave away all the instruments too. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So $5,000 of instruments were left there for them, and hardware and guitar picks and strings, and so it's like, wow. I imagine how much use all of those things and like how stoked were these people.
And that was 6 years ago, right?
Oh,
so like they've been putting it to use for all these years.
Amazing.
You know, it was, and it's funny because some of the bands that went on tour with us had been there previously. I think 3 or 4 years previously, and there were people who like knew all the lyrics to their songs.
That's so
like
cool.
It was like, oh, this band came to our town. Like they're coming back. You know, it was. Everyone was super appreciative. You know, I got to see. You know, Canadians travel to Cuba all the time. We don't have the same kind of relationship with the country that America does, obviously. And actually, it was Cuban or Canadians tourism that helped revitalize Cuba's economy in the 90s after the fall of the Soviet Union. Yeah. Because Cuba's economy was so reliant on the Soviet Union, you know, all throughout the Cold War. So it was, you know, it was a lot of Canadian tourism that really helped revitalize their economy. Anyone from Canada can go and stay at a nice beachfront resort and go swimming in the ocean. We did that too. It was beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But like, we got to, because we were there with Cubans who were showing us around the country, we got to go places that people don't normally get to go.
That's special.
Eat in restaurants that people don't normally get to eat in, and like play some of these like venues that you would like never otherwise get to do. And like, we even got recognized. Like, there'd be a couple days later, we were on the beach and someone came out and said, I saw you guys play two days ago. We kind of became local celebrities on the island. That's cool, man. So it was literally maybe the coolest thing I've ever done. Music, wrestling, whatever. I've traveled a decent amount, but like, it's genuinely one of the most just positive, impactful things I've ever done, for sure. Yeah.
So let's say whatever, earthquake, tornado, something's happening, right? Crazy occurrence happening, natural disaster, and everything that you can consume is on, you know, videotape or record, right? So any media that you want to consume, your house is about to be eliminated. You have to pick one wrestling card and one LP to save. What would they be?
So like a videotape of
videotape, DVD, Blu-ray, whatever it is. You know?
Oh boy, wow! What's my favorite card? It's probably going to be like a VHS tape, because I still have all my old wrestling VHS tapes of a promotion called Battle Arts.
Okay.
90s Japanese wrestling promotion, was one of the like truly unique promotions that melded shoot style pro wrestling, which is, you know, very akin to what you see on like a UFC show, with like very pro style presentation. So a lot of shoot style wrestling, especially in the 90s, is like, this is a shoot. Even though it wasn't, but like what we're presenting you is a shoot. And like, there's no mincing Battle Arts. It's like, they work like it's a shoot. Like, they work hard. They hit each other incredibly hard, but like, they're doing topes and they're doing, you know, and it was seeing that stuff for the first time when I was like 16, 17. That was
kind of like Bloodsport.
kind of like Bloodsport. Yeah, like Bloodsport. And not only did that have such an influence in me as a teenager, especially as I was getting into working myself, but way back in the year 2020, I got to wrestle Yuki Ishikawa and Daisuke Ikeda, who Ishikawa was the founder of Battle Arts. Ikeda was his top rival.
Okay.
And I got to wrestle them in a tag match in Germany.
Wow.
And so I would need a card headlined by those two guys.
Sure.
From they had a match in May 98 that I love. They have another match in August of 99. And one of those cards headlined by Ikeda and Ishikawa. Not only would it give me the memory of... Yeah. And then as far as music goes, I think because this kind of ties it all in, but this was the record that got me playing guitar again as an adult. I took guitar lessons as a teenager, kind of fell off for years, and then wanted to learn how to play guitar again to impress a girl. Yeah. As one does.
As you do.
And ended up basically learning how to play this record and playing along to it, and that's Neutral Milk Hotels.
Nice.
In the Aeroplane Over the Sea.
Okay.
Merge Records, 1998, obviously a much heralded record. Mm-hmm. And I actually played in a Neutral Milk Hotel cover band.
Really?
I did. And that record just means the world to me.
Wow.
So much just emotional resonance, and also just, I think, having the memories of learning a trade, and like trade is too strong a word, but like learning a craft. Yeah. You know, picking up guitar again, and all of the memories I have had in the subsequent, 15 years from learning guitar again, and now being able to travel the world and meet some of my best friends in the world. And so I think two things that metaphorically they're foundational, right? And they really opened up worlds for me, and they're so important to me. So
we're getting nerdy with the wrestling genius Daniel Makabe here on the Defiant Ones. We'll be back in a minute with a couple more questions here on the Defiant Ones. Back here on the Defiant Ones, we're with Daniel Makabe. So pick a scar on your body. Tell us the story of how you got it. Show us if you can. Doesn't have to be wrestling related.
Okay, so I got two matching scars. I don't know how easy you can tell, but I got one on this upper lip, and I got one on this upper lip. Mm-hmm. I don't know how obvious they are, but anyways, no one wants to see that. Anyways, this upper lip, 7 years old, roughhousing around with one of my mom's friends' older sons. Mm-hmm. I was 7, he was probably 16. Press slam, throwing me across the room onto his bed, you know, horsing around.
Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, and he had a waterbed. And so he pressed over his head, threw me across the room, lawn darted me onto this waterbed. Jesus. And if you think about it, if you hit in the middle of the waterbed, it's all going to rush up. And you're going to hit the box spring.
Jesus.
Boom. Split lip, 7 years old, crying, blood all over. I think you're going to have to go get stitches. What? I'm going to have to go get stitches?
Yeah.
Emergency room on like a Wednesday night. My mom actually passed out and slid down the wall watching when they put the anesthesia in my lip, because my mom's kind of squeamish. So I think 3 or 4 stitches in my lip when I was 7. Fast forward, I'm 28. And I'm wrestling another guy, Davey Vega, another independent wrestler based in the Midwest, St. Louis. We're having a match on a backyard show. Yeah. And he gives me a DDT, kind of the springboard, if you can picture it as a Young Buck spot, but springboard off the middle rope, jump over the far rope, DDT onto the apron. Yeah. And the ring that we were in that particular night, the padding wasn't big enough to cover the whole ring. So it had been slid over, and we didn't quite realize it. So I was standing on the apron waiting to get DDT'd, and I just landed straight on board. Ugh. Boom. Split that lip open, 4 stitches, wrestled the next day. But yeah, so 20 years apart, matching scars, split lips.
Good time. I see him now.
You can see him, sure. Yeah.
Daniel Makabe, it's been a pleasure, man. Every time I see you, man, we always just nerd out. It's been awesome chatting with you. Any final words for Defy? Any final words for the Defiant Ones?
Thank you for having me. If you're not already, follow me on social media at Daniel Makabe, and I appreciate you. Yes. Always being a champion of me and local music and all that, and just I really, anytime we get a chance to talk. I mean, we could talk all day, honestly. It'd be great. But I do appreciate you having me.
But you got a match. You got to go.
I do have a match. And I appreciate Defy having me.
Makabe, thank you so much, man.
Thanks.
Yes.
Professional wrestling has a brand new home where you can watch top-tier action for free. DEFY, Enjoy, PCW Ultra, and more. Your new destination for the very best professional wrestling. Remix.tv, where we watch wrestling.